I'd first like to thank you, Mr. President, for presiding over this excellent debate. I'd like to thank my fellow proposers, Honourable Member Annie Williamson and obviously Honourable Member Jose Manuel Barroso. Their speeches were utterly convincing, I thought. They were meticulously objective, thank you very much. They were empirically grounded in fact, not fiction. They were authoritative, they were balanced, they absolutely hit the mark. I also want to compliment those who've spoken from the opposition benches, the Honourable Member Jan Nedvidek and obviously Sir William Cash. They made up for their lack of objectivity with great humour and verve and aplomb, and I thank them for that as well. But I want to thank all of you, each and every one of you, for standing in what I was told it was some mind-numbingly cold queue outside to come to this debate. You are right to do so, because this subject, in my view, is one of the most important subjects we could possibly debate in this venerable hall here this evening. The Oxford Union has seen down the years, down the generations, debates on issues of immense importance to our country. Peace, war, culture, ethics, philosophy, social change, global upheaval, domestic constitutional change. But I would argue that this debate today is by far the most important issue which faces our community, our family, our nation, our family of nations that has faced us in a very long period. It is arguably far more important than the outcome even of general election, and I can say that having just spectacularly lost one. So thank you for being here in such impressive numbers. And I want to start my case for the proposition by quoting the memorable words, I mean truly memorable words, of someone who really had the same relationship with the American language and American syntax that John Prescott famously had with the English language in the House of Commons. He's not a Brit, he's not even a European. He is Donald Rumsfeld. And let me try and read out once again these famous words that he uttered on February the 12th, 2002. And it goes as follows. There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. Hands up, anyone who can make any sense of that whatsoever. Thought so. The reason I read this out is because so much of what we are debating today is, of course, in one strict sense of the word, unknowable. We don't know the future. No one can claim that they know precisely what the outcome will be for our nation or even for the European Union if we were to go this way or that. There is a great deal that we don't know because we don't know what is going to face us in years to come. So in a sense, the decision before us, and your decision, each and every single one of you, when you decide whether you're going to vote for this proposition or vote against it, is really a judgment. It's not a sort of scientific, empirical, sort of laboratory experiment. It is a judgment. It is a judgment about the balance, if you like, of risk between the costs and benefits, and there are both, of course, of being part of this European Union club, and the risks, I will argue, the huge, incalculable, irresponsible risks of yanking ourselves out of the world's largest borderless marketplace. That is the judgment each and every one of you needs to reach this evening, and it is the judgment that millions of your fellow citizens will have to arrive at for themselves when, as Sir William Cash said, they do that sacred thing and put a cross next to a yes or no answer in that referendum over the next couple of years. So since it is a judgment about a balance of risks, about a future we don't fully know, I will only dwell in my remarks on what we do know. And let me tell you what I think we do know about British exit from the European Union, if, heaven forfend, that were to happen. We know that we will be immeasurably less relevant to many other major nations around the world. The United States, China, Brazil, the rising powers around the world. Why do we know that? Not because I say it, because they say it. Because they say it. The Obama administration has pushed the limits of international diplomacy in spelling out in words of one syllable that, guess what? If we can't stand tall in Beijing, in Brussels and Paris and Berlin, why on earth would we stand tall in Washington or Tokyo or Beijing or New Delhi? And I tell you privately, in the 5 years I was in government, American decision makers were a lot less polite in that they simply cannot comprehend. They cannot comprehend why their great cousins across the Atlantic would jeopardize our place in the world's largest borderless marketplace. So that's something we know. We know that we will be less safe. Again, don't take my words for it. Take the people whose job it is to keep us all safe. Look at the article written by Sir Hugh Orde, the former chairman of the Association of Chief Police Officers this very weekend. He couldn't have put it more starkly. He couldn't have put it more spine-chillingly. If we pull out of the European arrest warrant, by the way, the same European arrest warrant that got the arrest of Hussein Osman, who committed that awful terrorist atrocity on 7/7 in London, he said if we pull out of the European Union, our streets will be less safe. So we know that. We know that there will be less investment coming in to the United Kingdom. European investment on an annual basis into the UK economy, a highly open economy, and we've benefited from that openness, amounts to around £26 billion per year. How do we know that? Because they tell us. The investors in our financial services, in the sort of whiz-bang financial centre of the City of London, through to Asian car manufacturers who invest in 21st century cutting-edge car manufacturing plants in the northeast of this country, tell us that they will pull their money out. And no wonder. The reason they're investing hundreds of millions of pounds opening factories so that we now produce more cars as a nation than we ever have done since the early 1970s is precisely so that they can export those cars onwards into the rest of Europe. So we know that too. We know as well that if we were to pull out of the European Union, of course, and this is this complete straw man that the opposition benches, once again, this hackneyed straw man argument that the opposition benches repeated again this evening, of course we'll have a trading arrangement with the European Union. We're not going to sort of hermetically seal ourselves off into wrapping paper if we pull out of the Union. Of course not. There will be trade. It's what kind of trade? And one thing we know is you can't pull out of the single market and then expect to have all the privileges of the single market. You can't, I'm afraid, have your cake and eat it. It simply will not happen. We know that too. And by the way, to just knock on its head this idea that somehow they need us more than we need them, the facts speak for themselves. 45% of everything we export goes to the European Union. Guess what the percentage, equivalent percentage is for everything that is traded from the European Union to the rest of the world that comes to the United Kingdom? Not 45%, not 35%, not 25%, not 15%, not even 10%, 6%. 45% for us, 6% for them. Just work out the rest for yourselves. We also know that if we pull out of the European Union, there will be less access to international markets worldwide. And José Manuel Barroso was quite right to highlight the words from the US Trade Representative, Michael Froman, very recently. I thought it was very striking indeed, that a sort of technocratic international diplomat responsible for America's trade relations and the web of trade agreements that America enters into around the world should have been that unequivocal, almost that rude. And he basically said, forget it. If Britain thinks, notwithstanding the sepia-tinted glory of the special relationship we have with our English-speaking cousins across the Atlantic. He said, forget it. If you think you're going to cut a special deal with us, you're not. He said it in terms, we are not interested. We want to deal with the European Union as a whole. And again, no wonder that a bloc of 500 million consumers is going to have more clout with the Americans, with the Chinese and others. In an incarnation, a professional incarnation, long before I went into politics, I played a small role in the team that negotiated China's entry into the World Trade Organization. Does anyone seriously think that those chisel-faced, hard-edged Chinese trade negotiators took what I said seriously as a young pipsqueak bureaucrat as I was at the time, because I represented the United Kingdom on its own? No. They took what I said seriously because I represented, in one shape or form, the world's largest borderless marketplace in the world. It doesn't subtract from our power to act together with other European countries. It adds considerably to our clout to do so. So we know that too. And there is one final thing that we know as well. Arguably the most ominous of all. Arguably the most serious of all for us, for Britain, for the country I love, for the country I'm devoted to. And it is this, that if we vote to leave the European Union, it is most likely that we will lose the United Kingdom as well. And why do we know that? Because the Scottish nationalists could not have been clearer. If the United Kingdom pulls out of the European Union, and most especially if that is because of a vote taken south of the border rather than north of the border, they have put us on alert. No one should be surprised. That will be the trigger for a referendum which will most likely lead to Scotland leaving the United Kingdom. We will not lose one union, Britain's place in the European Union. We will lose two unions. That is what we know. Conversely, what do we know if we vote to stay in and support the proposition this evening? Well, we know the European Union is not perfect. Of course it's not perfect. Westminster's not perfect. Whitehall's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. Was this sort of infantile pursuit of complete perfection? Guess what? It doesn't exist in life. Well, maybe it does in some of your lives, but certainly not mine. When I was in the European Union, worked in the European Union, it took 15 years for the European Union to decide the definition of chocolate. Anything that takes a decade and a half to decide chocolate is no sinister superstate, and it's certainly not. So of course it's going to continue to be imperfect. We also know, of course, many decisions will go our way. Some decisions won't. That is the nature of compromise. Compromise is not a dirty word. It happens when you have 28 member states in one club. So we know that too. We also know that even if we decide overwhelmingly to stay in, there will be some voices, and I hope it won't be Nigel or Sir William, because I think this is a fate that shouldn't befall them. They're decent characters. There will be some people. There will be some people who, like those Japanese soldiers who continued fighting the last war because no one had told them it had ended in some Pacific island, who will carry on arguing and arguing and arguing. The rest of us will just move on and carry on with the rest of our lives. But above all, I believe we know this. If we want Britain, our country, our nation, to shape, to help control, to help master the events of the world, not just stand passively by and watch it and have the forces of the world inflicted upon us. If we want to do that, if we want to be masters of our own destiny and not have our fate written for us by others, there is no other alternative but doing so in harness, in concert with our European nations elsewhere in the European. I don't want my little children to grow up in a United Kingdom which is broken apart and the remains of which are drifting friendlessly in the mid-Atlantic. That is not the proud future I want for my country, for my children. It's not the proud future I want for my country. It's not the proud future I would argue we want for our nation as a whole. I want them to grow up in a strong Britain, able to keep them safe from cross-border crime, safe from the threat of runaway climate change, secure and prosperous in jobs here in Britain, confident about their futures, in an open-minded, generous, spirited United Kingdom, an open United Kingdom, not a closed United. We've always been greatest as Great Britain when we've been open, not cowering and shrinking into the corner from international affairs. So for that reason, and because you've been standing in a queue for so long to come here, I beg you to support the proposition tonight.